wrote the book for the pure intention of paying it forward from my experience so the next guy maybe doesn't have to go through what I went through. So my background is manufacturing engineering. I did that for years, got my MBA at night, and while I was kind of coming through that, I met some entrepreneurs who owned another company in the lighting space. They basically came to me to be an operating partner. Because my background was more around the manufacturing, we did a small pivot and away we went, and the business started having some success.
What was it about the company at the time that really made it valuable for you to risk so much?
I didn't look at the company like it was, hey, this is something really valuable. It was more like, I have something here that I built. I programmed the website. I did the PDFs for all the selling pages. And at that point, like, the company was kind of a reflection of me. It was everything that I did to create it.
When you became 100% owner, did you have any ideas or thoughts about potentially selling it again or selling it at all?
No, it wasn't even on the radar. It was never like, hey, I'm gonna buy this equity and turn it. You know, for me, it was always a cash flow game.
What do you wish you knew before you sold to private equity? Like the one thing that, like, it's just like, man, that one, I really wish I would have known that part of it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I am Vince Perri, your exit advisor, business broker, and here really to give you as much knowledge and information as possible from some industry experts and some people with some amazing experiences. And I feel quite lucky today, Jason, because you are a big reason as to why and how I became a SEPA was just straight up from your amazing book that you wrote, Things I Wish I Knew Before I Sold to Private Equity. Jason, that book, honestly, was incredible. It's a real life book, real life experiences. You were raw and honest, and I appreciate you writing that book, and I appreciate you being on the show, man.
Thank you for all that, and the best compliment you could give is that my book spoke to you. I wrote the book for the pure intention of paying it forward from my experience so the next guy maybe doesn't have to go through what I went through.
Did you write the book for me? Or did you write the book for the business owner who may or may not have these opportunities of, before we get into it, not one, not two, but 3 bites of the apple?
Yeah, you know, I guess I could say both. You know, it's, you know, anybody who's in the ecosystem who wants to do anything in and around M&A, whether you're a business advisor or you're a business owner, you know, I have an MBA, I have a ton of experience, but no one ever dug into the nuances of what it is to transact a business, work within investment banking and private equity and kind of how all that comes together. And really, as I was going through my experience on it, I just wanted to document some of those experiences that were real for me, and put them on paper and say, hey, you know, when you come across this, think about kind of what this means in the broader sense, and here's some real world experiences that I've gone through that you can draw upon to make your own decisions going forward. Yeah. So it's, you know, it was kind of a passion project. It was, you know, during COVID I wrote most of it, and my wife was a big part of helping me put it together, because I would go through and have a chapter and I would say, okay, what do you think? And she'll be like, I remember when this happened and it's not coming through. And then she would help me craft the story based on her recollection of whatever the story was to make sure that the real world experience came through on the pages.
That's fantastic. That's a good partner you got there, Jason.
Oh yeah, 28 years.
So let's give people a little bit of the backstory. From what I know is you graduated, you are in the manufacturing and automation, and the company that you originally, I don't know if did you actually start it? I know you came in and you were working energy efficient lighting, and if you could tell me a little bit about that, sort of the business that you were involved in and how it all started.
Yeah, so my background is manufacturing engineering, and I worked in an air conditioning factory for years, and I ended up, you know, having a big part in running the metal shop. And part of running the metal shop at that point in time, it was, you know, mid-90s, they were really leaning into automation, going from 3D computer drawings to 2D DXFs to CAD CAM and automating the factory. And the president of the company at that time his theory was my ability to grow this company is going to be predicated on my ability to make the metal required for growth. And I was really required to increase capacity, increase efficiencies, and just make us better at everything overall through systems in the computer and then systems with the machinery. So I did that for years, got my MBA at night, and while I was kind of coming through that, I met some entrepreneurs who owned another company in the lighting space, and they basically came to me to be an operating partner. And they had an idea for a business. This was, mid-2002, and I ended up kind of throwing caution to the wind, quitting my corporate job and everything to go into this partnership with these guys. Two of them were my age and one of their fathers, who had already, shown a lot of success. So we kind of got the business going. We had an initial thesis on what we thought we were going to do, and because my background was more around the manufacturing, we did a small pivot, and away we went, and the business started having some success. And that's kind of how we got started in the energy efficient lighting. And again, it was their expertise in the field. I just kind of polished the stone and went in a slightly different direction than they were going. And that's kind of like how the whole thing got rolling.
Gotcha. And you guys scaled quickly, if I'm not mistaken. You guys are being very successful. And according to the book, was it that you guys got hit by the financial crisis, or was it that your partners just didn't really want to be involved anymore?
It wasn't that. Scale by today's standards of, I could put an app on your phone and it goes viral. I mean, scaling by those standards, we were bootstrap, mom and pop kind of deal. My partners were in a predicament where they were in the same industry I was. We got bigger, and by big, I mean we weren't massive, but we got disruptive faster than we expected, and they found themselves where our success was disrupting their primary business. It was like, hey, we're great partners on this, but you have ownership in this other company, and this other company's kind of starting to create some waves, and maybe that's not the best thing. So it was 2008, and they said, hey, we really need to divest from this, and we would love it if you bought us out, and we'll be fair sellers on valuation and terms, and do everything we can to make a smooth transition. And they did. And we ended up closing that transaction in the beginning of 2009. And, any transaction's going to have a couple bumps through, getting to the finish line. But when it was all said and done, they were a partner, a vendor, and a customer to us. And we were the same to them. And we had a good relationship for many, many years after that.
So tell me, what was that like? Because according to your story, it was quite the risk that you took. You gave up a lot, both both business-wise, but also you put some personal things on the line as well to ultimately be able to buy them out.
Yeah, so this was 2000. I was getting the deal financed in 2008, and again, by today's, .com VC money, it wasn't a lot, but for me and my wife in 2008, it was everything. So we had, when we first were, very, very early on in our marriage, we had a small duplex. We lived in half it, rented the other half, and then we bought the house across the street and rented out the whole duplex and did a little refinance, and we were kind of, doing all that. And then when it came time to do the business transaction, it was, had to sign over the house, had to sign over the savings account, had to sign over pretty much everything. So it was a combination of seller note and bank note, and we were able to find a bank that didn't have access to or exposure to some of the bad loans that were dragging everything down during the great financial crisis. So we found a very young bank that had money to lend, and they liked the story of the partnership, that they were a vendor to the company, they were a partner to the company, and it wasn't just they were selling their equity and going away, that they really did have, and with their seller note, they had every reason to see the company succeed. So it was, again, a great relationship with the bank. And at that time, I had an advisor that helped me put all that together. And that advisor was really somebody who was very, very important to me, a mentor who, even to this day, I still lean on for stuff all the time. And he kind of sherped me through the process and really became the model of what I do today with my practice.
So what were some of the things that he helped you with? And it's a twofold question. What were some of the things that he advised you and helped you throughout that process? And what did you ultimately learn from that first buyout?
Yeah, it was a situation where, my partners had come to me and said, "Hey, we need to do something with our equity in this business." And I don't think any of us, I certainly didn't do any type of a transaction that size. And through just a stroke of luck, somebody had lent me to, his name's Mike Scott, and lent me to him, and he had experience with many types of banking, but also asset-based lending. And he said, well, maybe there's an asset deal here. You've got a lot of equipment and inventory. Maybe there's a way to do this through asset-based lending. And we started going down that path. We went down the SBA path. So here I am like, hey, how do I do this deal? And now I'm going through trying to figure out all these different avenues to make all this work. And when all of it was said and done, he kind of helped create the, hey, we're going to have a seller note, we're going to have a bank note, we're going to have a line of credit, and he kind of set everything up to make sure I was going to be successful in a way that I didn't know to do. I was basically building a company, manufacturing products. I was a hawk when it came to my product cost and my margins and my gross margins and how much I needed to sell to cover my overhead. I was really, really dialed in on that, but I wasn't versed in how to finance in what was actually a very, very, very small, nascent leverage buyout. Mm-hmm. And he kind of walked me through all that. Years later, when I did my first private equity deal, he also held my hand through that whole process, which was a whole nother thing.
What was it about the company at the time that really made it valuable for you to risk so much? Besides your job, of course.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't look at the company like it was, hey, this is something really valuable. It was more like, I have something here that I built. At that point, I was, 5-6 years into building it, everything from I programmed the website, I did the PDFs for all the selling pages, I did I had Adobe Photoshop and created all of our marketing material. I mean, anytime I needed something, I could either pay someone else to do it, or I could stay up late reading the manuals on how to use the software and just do it myself. And at that point, the company was kind of a reflection of me. It was everything that I did to create it. And I had a fractional CFO at the time, and she looked at the books and she goes, honestly, Jason, she goes, you could carry the debt pretty easily. She's like, it's not going to be a hardship for you. We just went through an incredibly rough financial period. We'll come out of this, and you grew through the whole thing. She's like, if you fast forward several years, this may be the best thing that's ever happened to you. And on her advice and my advisor Mike's advice, and I just kind of said, okay, I'm going to own the whole thing, and I'm going to get out any conflicts of interest and any noise or anything else. And I had some things in the back of my mind that I wanted to do to grow, that trying to get all of this done was becoming a distraction to. So once I kind of got to the other side of the deal, I kind of had a plan of what I thought I was going to do to try to take it to the next level. And I was just ready just to put all of the uncertainty of a transaction behind me and lean into that growth plan.
So you became 100% owner.
100%. Yeah.
And what was that feeling like? Because now you have full reins, you have full control. It doesn't seem like the partners you had were I know they wanted to get out, but it doesn't seem like they really did. I guess you always had to go to them for a decision, but it doesn't seem like they were holding you back much. Was it like a relief? Was it like a weight off your back, being now 100% owner, or was it more of a weight on your back instead?
It was both. My partners were great.
Yeah.
I mean seriously. Jay, Mike, and Vaughn gave me my start, believed in me, gave me the keys to the company, weren't overbearing. They were fantastic. And the one guy's, the older fellow, the father, his name was Vaughn. Whenever I had something happen that was kind of like a tragedy, or where I really felt like I was up against it, he was the first person I would call, and he always took my calls. These were great partners. These were great people. They invested in a business, And for, factors that were a little bit outside of their control, they just had to move the investment along. And, so when we were coming through it, by the time we were kind of in the weeds of putting together the deal, and they had financial advisors and lawyers and everything else, they had a lot of voices in their ears, and it created a little bit of choppiness towards the end. But when it came to closing, Vaughn walked in the room and said, this is the deal that we're going to do, and Jason's going to make good on it. Everybody's going to be good, and this is it. We're all moving forward as friends. And that was the end of it. Vaughn put his foot down, and that was the end of it. They were great. But once you kind of turned the page, it was kind of twofold. Like, hey, my safety net's not there anymore, because they were kind of a safety net. So the safety net wasn't there anymore. I was 100% on my own. I had a whole bunch of debt. I had to make good on the debt, and I certainly didn't want to give away, my duplex and all of that. So it was kind of like, yeah, I'm happy that the deal making and the sausage and the documents and all that is over, but it was also, okay, it's go time. Like, time to dial it up. We need to take this to the next level. We need to, start, really focusing 100% on the execution of the business, not maybe 65% on that and 35% of getting a deal done. So it was all those things. And honestly, it was at a time that we were just about to come out of the financial crisis. We were in energy efficient lighting. It was a very good time to be in that space. I mean, the timing couldn't have been better. There were some technology changes taking place way before LED that we just kind of ended up stumbling into at a good time. So the market was growing. We were able to pick up a piece, and kind of everything came together to our benefit.
You mentioned a couple of times how you mentioned the business as an investment. You've mentioned it a couple of times, and most business owners don't look at that. They look at this is just their job. This is them owning a company and having some freedom because they don't have to work for somebody else. They don't really look at it as an actual investment that they could ultimately flip for more later. When you became 100% owner, did you have any ideas or thoughts about potentially selling it again or selling it at all?
No. It wasn't even on the radar. I mean, that thought it was never like, hey, I'm going to buy this equity and turn it. Right. For me, it was always a cash flow game. It was, you make a product for $75, you sell it for $100, you make $25, you have $100,000 a month of overhead, so you got to sell enough products to cover your overhead, and then after that, maybe you make a little bit of money. It really wasn't much more than that, and now, post-transaction, now I had to pay off, some debt. Right. And I was, and still am, very, very, very debt adverse. So at that point in time, it was go time to pay down the debt, and that's what I did.
So how long, so tell me about after that, you become 100% owner, your main focus is to obviously make money, pay off your debt, and keep doing and keep scaling. What was the main focus? What were some of your ideas? You seem to me, based on what you're telling me, Jason, is you seem to be more of the operational guy, making sure everything does what it's supposed to do, as opposed to marketing and sales. What were some of the ideas that you had where you're like, all right, I got this, and we're going to take it to the next level? And what were your expectations?
Yeah, so, I would, at the beginning of every year, do a budget for that year that would have modest growth in it. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time focusing on that, but I did want to kind of have an idea. So I had an idea of where I wanted to be budgetarily, but as far as the company was concerned, I kind of had three things that I was kind of doing all at the same time. One, there was another technology bubble within lighting that we wanted to lean into. It was, around a special type of induction fluorescent lamp, and we thought that there was a spot in the market to create some products around that, and we did, and we engineered the products. I had to put together some partnerships on how that came together, and that was very helpful. The second thing was, at that point in time, we weren't nationwide, so I kind of had a growth map of some other areas of the country that I wanted to start selling into, and to kind of make all that happen, I had to make a deeper investment in our sales organization, which included promoting somebody to the sales manager role to get me out of managing the sales network to have somebody else do that. And the last thing was I needed to grow our footprint. We were in, I think at that point, a 15,000 square foot building. And literally every day we would build skids and skids of lights and have to put them in the parking lot. In Orlando, Florida, it rains every day. And this, during the summer. So we would have to tarp everything off until we could load the trucks. And it was just, I had no parking. I was renting parking from all my neighbors, and I just really needed a bigger space. So kind of all of that was happening around the same time. So that was kind of my pathway to growth, was new product line, some expansion there, new geography, and I needed more space. So those were the three things that I really leaned into post that first buyout of my original investors.
So I want to continue on this path, but since the name of your book is Things I Wish I Knew Before I Sold to Private Equity, before your first quote unquote exit, is not an exit, but the first we'll
call it a recapitalization of the balance sheet.
What was something that you wish you knew before you got into that process? This is the first one.
So the biggest thing I wish I had more peace with how much debt I was taking out on the company, because I had so much fear and trepidation around the debt. Like, oh my God, I'm taking this loan out, and it's so much more than any amount of money I've ever seen in my life. And I mean, at that point, it wasn't a lot of money, but at that point, it was everything. And I wish I could have just sat back and said, you know what, a little bit of debt is okay. And my mindset at that time was use free cash flow to pay down that debt and make that debt go away, because debt is bad. And I wouldn't even pay myself a dividend until the debt was gone. When in reality, what I learned from especially my first private equity partnership is I should have let that debt stretch out a little bit more and maybe used a little bit of the principal money that I was using to pay down the debt to maybe invest in more growth. Instead of paying another $150,000 a year against that debt, maybe I should have hired 2 engineers to design a couple more products for me and accelerate some of my growth. At that point in time, and this was one of the things that kind of led to our success, was my background, my manufacturing engineering background in metalwork. Like, I knew a certain generation of machines. I knew them very, very well. My guys on the shop floor knew them. So anytime one of those machines came up for sale, the machine tool dealers knew to call me. And as long as they were on the certain type of service plan, I would buy them sight unseen, because they'd be like, hey, we're taking them in for 40 grand. Do you want them? And I'm like, yeah, send them. And when we did our relocation in 2010, we went from 15,000 to 40,000 square feet. I never thought I'd fill the 40,000 square feet. So anytime somebody had a machine, I just bought it. Whether I had work for it or not, sometimes I would be like, well, it's worth the tool holders, or just to have another control in case a board in my control goes out. I would just buy them. And through that time, had I taken maybe just a little bit of that money that I was using to accelerate the payoff of our debt and take that money and invest it in new products, because what I found over time was I was in a huge industry, and the thing probably I missed during this was I could have accelerated our product development process much more and gotten more products that were kind of tangential to the products that we were selling, and that would have been beneficial to our growth.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a common thing growing up. If you were raised with, even like lower middle class to lower class, you're always concerned. And, I mean, I was taught to always, don't get a credit card. And if you do, make sure you pay it off, and be careful with debt and this and that. And ultimately, I mean, this country was built on debt. And but it's hard to sort of comprehend that, especially when you're thinking about that kind of money. I'm sure that was I'm sure it kept you up at night. Yeah.
Well, we were successful, and what was happening at that time, so we went from, call it 7 million in sales in 2008 to 20 by the end of 2012. When you're in manufacturing, if you triple your sales, you're probably tripling your inventory, and you're also, in my industry, you're tripling your accounts receivable. So everybody in my industry, they're buying on 30-60, they all want 90-day terms, and you really have to work the terms games with your customers. But if your inventory is growing, your accounts receivable is growing, those are balance sheet assets, but they're not cash assets. So you could be showing a tremendous profit and you're going to be cash poor. So there was a point in time where I was taking money off my line of credit on a quarterly basis to pay my taxes and waiting for the cash to catch up because my top line was accelerating so fast. But to accelerate your top line, you need the inventory and receivables to support it. And one of the things in our industry that was important was lead time. So you don't really make a inventory sacrifice to have extra cash. You lean into your inventory to create your ability to respond to customer demand.
Wow. And what's the turnaround time that for the accounts receivables? How long would it take to actually get that back?
Our typical terms were 30. We had some customers that wanted 60, and what we found a lot of times is if I gave you 30-day terms, once the clock hit 30 days, we would be cut a check on your next check run cycle. So a 30-day terms meant we were probably getting our money in 50 days. We had a lot of our biggest customers, the big national distributors, that would push for 60 days, and then they would want discount terms, and then they'd want to take fast payment discount terms and not pay fast. I mean, the payable side of a complex distribution model like that, where you have multiple layers between you and the end consumer, gets really tricky. You really have to watch your cash flow.
So your first buyout, what was like the size of your company, number of employees? If you can share overall gross revenue, that'd be cool. And then I'd like to see if we could now fast forward to where the next opportunity came about, and what was the size of the company then?
Yeah, so from when I bought out my original partners, we were about $7 million in sales, and we, between then and the end of 12, when I did my first private equity deal, we just about tripled on the top line, and we were probably 4 or 5x on the bottom line. So we were really firing on all cylinders, despite the fact that I didn't watch our margins at all. I watched our margin on a per product basis, where I would look at like I would go through, and I did everything on spreadsheets. I would go through every one of our product families. I had spreadsheets of what all my main components cost, what I thought my labor cost, my average labor rate, and those spreadsheets are what everybody would quote jobs on. So we had a good idea of what our straight COGS were on stuff, but really leaning into monthly and quarterly reporting, what was our gross margin, what was our net margin, the things that I teach entrepreneurs now that I absolutely didn't do, what's my trailing 12 EBITDA, is it growing, is it shrinking, what is it as a percentage of my sales, am I tracking that over time, do I have metrics for that? The things that I teach entrepreneurs and business owners now were things that I absolutely did not do in that period between when I bought out my original partners and I did my first private equity deal.
And what is the what's the gross margin goal here in the manufacturing industry? What were you trying to get to?
At that point in time, again, this is the period between, call it the end of 8 and the end of 12, that 4-year run when I was the 100% owner. There were no goals. It was sell as much as you can, buy machinery, pay down the debt, figure out your line of credit for your taxes, and just grow. And probably by about the end of 10 going into 11, I extinguished all the debt, and then I really started to see the cash accumulating on the balance sheet, where my controller was like, do you want to check? You have a bunch of money in the account. It's been sitting there for a while. And I'm like, really? And there just wasn't a lot of focus on that. Now, after I did my first private equity turn at the end of 2012, the focus on margin was severe.
Okay, tell me about that. I shouldn't have asked you those gross questions and into the weeds. Nobody cares about that stuff, right? Let's get to the story of the second. I guess I would call it the first bite of the apple, but I guess we could call it the second bite of the apple. Tell me the story about that. How did that come about?
It's the first time there was an apple.
Yeah, it's the first. Yeah, it's the first bite of the apple. Yeah. So tell me that. I can't wait to hear the story. I've already read about the story, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah. So back in, call it mid to late 2011, we started having people that were approaching us, wanting to have conversations, wanting to talk to me about the business and what was going on. If I'm not mistaken, at that point, I had been on the Inc. fastest growing companies.
Wow.
I was, I'd received some local business development awards. I mean, there were some accolades that I received that basically put me on the radar for private equity groups. and investors and investment bankers and business brokers and all of these names that I really didn't know what the difference between one from another was. And I went back to my original mentor, Mike Scott, and I said, hey, phone's starting to ring, help me figure out who these people are. And one of the main people that we had discussions with was a sponsor, somebody that had a thesis in our industry, and they wanted to consolidate a bunch of companies and create a larger entity. And they had a private equity backer that was interested in partnering with them, but wasn't 100% committed to their plans. But they were if they saw what they liked. And I reached out to my mentor and the person who helped me with my first buyout, and I said, hey, I have all these people coming at me. What does this all mean? And on a cocktail napkin one night, somebody taught me what a leveraged buyout was. And I was like, how can I get, at that time, $10 million for a slice of my equity and still own a significant portion of the company? And they're like, well, you use leverage, and there's all these ratios, and the leverage comes in, and this was all foreign to me. And I'm like, oh boy. So I'm navigating all this, and what I came to learn was the sponsor that was trying to put this all together had a company that was larger than us teed up, ready to go. And they wanted us to be an add-on. At that point in time, I didn't know what an add-on acquisition was. I had no idea. And frankly, I didn't even know to ask. And it's one of the first chapters of my book is know the difference between an add-on and a platform, and know if you have somebody buying you, are you an add-on or are you platform? Because there's a big difference.
For those that don't know, people, either if you're going to be an add-on, you're basically getting bought out by, you're getting bulldozed, you're getting taken over, which could be okay for some people if they want to get out, but I would say it's probably a lot more risk for your employees and things that are going on in your quote-unquote legacy, as opposed to if you're the actual company doing the other buyouts. That's when you're the platform company. So yeah, that's crazy. Go on.
I tell my clients and the entrepreneurs that I work with all the time that being an add-on isn't a bad thing, but it has to be aligned with your goals.
Right.
And there are some nuances of being an add-on that are very different than being a platform. And for you as a seller, the company that's buying you could already have a CEO, a CFO, yep, an HR department. And what does that mean for your folks? What does it mean for your brand? Will your brand be rolled up and consumed into another brand? And like, for instance, I have some friends that are in dentistry, and there's a lot of consolidation in dentistry right now. They don't care. They're going to sell their practice. They don't care if the name on the outside of the building changes. They have an outsourced HR, outsourced CFO. They're happy for all of that to be consolidated. They have a 3-year run as a dentist in the practice, and they're fine. But, other businesses, it may change the dynamic. But in that case, to go back to kind of where I was at that point in time, we started kind of working with these folks, not realizing that, we were really the add-on and the platform hadn't closed. And it seemed like it was dragging on forever. We had kind of the construct of a deal, but they had never put pen to paper that they wanted to do something. And it wasn't until we were kind of like, hey, it was really like 2011, I want to say it was right around Thanksgiving time, that we were supposed to have a face-to-face meeting. In the morning of the meeting, they canceled it, and they said, listen, this is what's going on. There's a platform acquisition here. We can't get them signed up. They won't sign on to our terms. It doesn't look like it's going forward. There's no reason for us to have a conversation because your company is too small for us to buy as a platform.
And you had no idea.
I had no idea. And then I'm like, what do you mean we're too small? And they're just like, where you are, you're just below our threshold. We're just not that interested in a company. At that point, we were, $2.5 million of EBITDA. Another word I didn't know then. And then it was like, okay, well, what does this all mean? And then I told my advisor and everybody that was around the deal, I said, listen, my debt's paid off. We're cash flowing. I don't need my line of credit to pay my taxes anymore. I've got a great team. Life is good. I believe in the industry. There's more rebates than ever. There's just all this government money going into retrofitting buildings. I'm good. Let's move on. And we get into 2012 and we're just crushing it. Everything's going good. The team is firing on all cylinders. I mean, it's a joy to go to work. I've got a great team. And my advisor calls me and says, hey, I have somebody else who I want to introduce you to. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to take any more meetings. He's like, listen, these are good guys. They have a real fund. They have a tremendous track record. They love middle market, get your hands dirty kind of business. And that's what we were. And I said, fine, I'll take the meeting. And it was mid-2012. And they were kind of like, okay, we kind of like what we see. We were growing. I think at that point we were approaching $3 million EBITDA, which for most PE guys are like the bare bones minimum you can do to be a platform investment. And again, things I didn't know. You know, most PE firms are going to spend between $500,000 and $1 million on due diligence. To do a platform investment, they're going to do a market study. Now they're going to do a quality of earnings. What they're going to do to validate a deal and the market and the company and the customers and the finances and the cloud and the things that they're going to do is going to cost them a tremendous amount of money. They're not doing it when they're going to write a $4 or $5 million equity check. It's just too small.
Okay, so that's a benefit to you.
Yeah, so they got interested in the company. We were just getting to the point that we were going to be interesting for them to buy. And as we kind of got close to it, we started getting towards the end of 2012. They had a bunch of validation and stuff that they wanted to do on their end. And if you remember the end of 2012, Barack Obama got elected. He said the Bush-era tax cuts were going to come to an end. We didn't know what they were going to be. We knew that December 31st of 2012 capital gains rates were going to change, but we had no idea what they were going to be. You know, it was whatever he could get through Congress and however that was going to play out. So what we had discussed between us internally was you have to get the deal done in 2012 or the deal terms change until we know what the tax laws are. And we ended up getting, into October and they said, hey, we're going to pull the trigger on this. And I remember having the call with the fellow from the firm. His name's John Lehman. And he says, listen, I got the deal approved. We got it through investment committee. But you need to know we're investing in you. Like, you need to be ready to go. We're going to close this deal first of the year. We're partners. We're going to work together. And we're going to really focus in on this deal. And sure enough, they closed December 28th of 12. And I remember going up to the closing, expecting a check and balloons to fall out of the ceiling, someone to kind of, like the bottle service people in a club, with the sparklers and everything. And literally the closing was the most uneventful thing you've ever seen. It was December 28th. It was like a Friday. It was the last real business day of the year before the New Year's. And everybody got on the phone. The lead attorney who had been doing everything, she says, okay, everybody got plans. What are we doing? Everybody have a happy New Year, whatever it was. And okay, great. She's like, great. So Finkston Partners, do you release your documents from escrow? And they say yes. And they're like, Mr. Hendren, do you release your documents from escrow? I said, yes, I do. They're like, okay, great. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. Wires will go by the end of the day. Thank you all very much. And silence. It's that's it. So my wife, being the champ that she is, she hands me a card, and when I open it, confetti falls out. That was my confetti moment, But literally, with the exception of my confetti card, the whole thing was just.
Did they tell you what their plans were? Did you know that their plans were to ultimately flip it?
Yeah, there was never any misdirection on that. They're like, hey,
okay,
we're a 4 to 7 year hold. That's what we do. We buy a company, we grow through acquisition. And to their credit, they told me at that point in time, they said, we are going to hold the company for 4 to 7 years.
Right.
And they said, once we get a couple years into this deal, we will give you the opportunity to transition the CEO role if you don't want to move on with the company when it goes past our ownership. And to their credit, when they thought they were about 2 years out and we could see how everything was going, and we were a couple of years into the investment, the head of the firm, his name is Jim Norton, and the guy who was my lead operator, his name's Ken Hesevic at Finkston. We had a lunch and they said, okay, so we're kind of at that point. If you stay on with the company, you need to know what that means. You're the founder, you're the CEO. When we go to sell this company, if you're sitting at the table as the CEO, you need to be ready to make a meaningful reinvestment in the deal. At that point, we had no idea what the economics were going to be. But you need to be ready to make a meaningful reinvestment and sign on for multiple years with the new owners. You need to be ready to sell this company as if you're going to continue to be with the company, giving it all the same energy you give today.
This is with 2 years left. They were telling you to make this decision still with 2 years left.
Yeah, we thought it was about 2 years. I mean, you never know where your exit cycle was going to be, but we were 2 years into the investment at that point, and we had grown significantly. One of the things, and I talk about it in the book, is we thought that we were going to grow through acquisition. They were absolutely convinced that our path to prosperity was going to be through acquisition, and our organic growth was insane. We just crushed it.
What was it like working with a private equity firm? Were they very involved? Did you meet everybody in the firm? Did you get to know everybody? I'm assuming you developed a good relationship. I'm sure you felt a lot of trust. These are very, very important things when you're going into business with people. And are you allowed to tell me what the equity split was when that first bite of the apple came?
So, a lot of questions there. So
sorry.
that's okay. So let's start off just.
What's the relationship like with a private equity firm? I'd like to know what is that like, because you're just one man.
So here I am, end of 2012. We're approaching the holidays. They tell me they're going to do a deal. I don't believe anything's going to happen. None of this is real to me. They invite me and Mike Scat up to their office, and we're going to go up and meet some folks at the firm. And I'm I was almost half of me was this isn't really going to happen. And the other half of me was if this happens, I'm going to get my liquidity event. I'm going to have money for the first time, real money for the first time in my life. And my vision was not to January 1st. My vision was till December 28th when we close. Once the wire's transferred, I wasn't thinking a lot beyond that other than I go to work every day. I've been doing it since I was 13. This is what I do. I'll just keep doing it. It's fine. I'm just going to go to work. So I remember it so vividly when Mike and I got off the elevator. Here it is, high rise in Chicago. I get off the elevator, big glass, office, absolutely beautiful. The name of the firm, big glass window overlooking the lake on the 54th floor or whatever it was. The big giant conference room. We walk in, the receptionist is there. There's all these people, doing the business of private equity. And I was oh man, this is real. You were did you know anybody? Not really. I knew John Lehman, who kind of put the deal together, and I had some very quick conversations with other people, but I'm this is real. This is what these guys do. They have as all private equity guys do, they have their wall of, tombstones, their trophies from all their deals, and it's here's all the deals we've done. And it's whoa, this is really a thing.
Yeah. And
I'm walking in, and all of a sudden the imposter syndrome kicks in. I'm I don't belong here. I don't run a business at this scale, And I was oh my God. So they're walking me around. Hey, this is Jason Hendren. We got a deal teed up for the end of the year. We wanted to bring them up and meet the team. And I'm just oh my God, this might actually happen. I remember calling my wife that night being this is looking like it's actually a thing. This may actually happen. So closing comes, and we get past the first of the year, and it's okay, we're going to grow through acquisition. They had a whole bunch of pre-study acquisition targets lined up.
Who are you? Did you have somebody assigned to you? Were you dealing with the entire company and a whole group? How does that work?
So my first private equity group that I partnered with in 12, similar to my group that I partnered with in 17, each one of them had an individual at the firm whose role it was to kind of one group called it a lead operator, and he was kind of the CEO's boss, and he had a handful of companies that he worked with. The other company that we partnered with in 2017 called it a group president. And
that was going to be my follow-up question, is like how much special attention do you get when they've got, I mean, these PE firms, they're buying anywhere from 5 to 10 companies a year.
Yeah, I mean, the good ones, and both of my partners were good ones, the good ones are going to have an operational staff that can handle the investments that they make. I mean, they just can't write checks and then let whatever was happening before happen with a CEO who just got a check. I mean, they have to dig in. And one of the reasons they have to dig in is they have CEO risk. You know, they wrote me a check. I could have gone home the next day and been like, you know, sorry about your luck. They're like, are you sick? No, I'm rich. I'm not coming into work today.
Yeah, I bet.
About, you know, somebody's going to do a deal and call in rich. It's CEO risk. Or I could have stunk. Like, they could have got to day 5 with me and realized that I wasn't the person that I portrayed myself to be, and they own the company. So both of the private equity firms that I partnered with had very deep operational resources to not only, you know, kind of keep an eye on the deal, but, and again, both firms were like this. They had an investment thesis. They basically, during their period between, you know, kind of getting to know us and finally buying us, they wrote up a business plan for what they were going to do as owners of this company to increase the value during their ownership period. And part of it was, like, for my first firm, it was, hey, we have offices in China. This company had never done any sourcing from Asia. We're going to look at their supply chain and their products and see how Asia can make them bigger. So within the first 3 months of my partnership with Finkston back in 2013, we were in Asia. They had a sourcing office in Asia, and we spent like 10 days in a van going all over China, going to different factories that did castings and lighting. And at that point, we were just beginning to see LEDs. And we were over there like trying to figure out what was the best play for us to make, both for our current products and for our future products.
This to me like feels like, this may sound stupid. This to me feels like you're part of like a almost like a mentorship coaching program of like people who know what they're freaking doing to just inject like superior experience, knowledge, and connections into your company and right?
All of that. I do Vistage speaking, right? So Vistage is you know, kind of a peer network for CEOs and key executives, and I go and speak to their groups about, you know, exit planning and things that you could do. And they're like, you know, do you ever regret doing your first deal? I'm like, absolutely not.
Must have been awesome.
I have never accomplished what we did between the beginning of 13 and when we did our second exit in after Q1 of 17. So 4 years and 3 months of our partnership. I could have never pulled that off if not for my partners. From sourcing, they were absolutely committed to leaning into our engineering team, hiring a mountain of engineers, and building an engineering lab. And they were like, yeah, we don't care. We're spending the money. We're building an engineering lab. I remember really early on, I was with Scott Finnegan. He was one of the head partners at Finkston. And we were in a meeting, and we were looking at doing our first buy of LED boards. And LED for our industry happens so much faster than any of us expected. And I'm like, yeah, so here's the tiers, and the top tier to get the best price was like we had to commit to like $200,000 worth of boards. He's like, well, yeah, buy those. And I'm like, I don't know, we've never sold any LEDs. He's like, Jason, that's why we're here. Sign up for the boards, get the best price, lean into the volume, and then we're going to spend the money to market and sell the products. Like it was just, he's looking at it going, it's $200,000. Like, what are you worried about? Just buy them. And I'm like, I don't, and he's like, no, that's why you have a partner. Like, and one of the things they were great at was they had a continuous improvement program that was absolutely core to their culture that they believed in. And we had people at our company that were sent to a continuous improvement training program, and we always had, you know, probably 2-3 times a year, we had a continuous improvement team working on some aspect of our business. And we had a continuous improvement champion at the company, we had continuous improvement leaders, and then me as the CEO, you know, I had to be committed to it, and I was. I mean, what our teams were doing were fantastic. And we would have these folks digging into pieces of our business. One of the most meaningful things, it was a program that was led by Kim Stockset, who ran our inside sales, was it was like, hey, we have all these packets of folders and all this stuff that kind of goes around the company. And, if the packets get lost, we're kind of in trouble. It's got the original purchase order and all the custom instructions. And we put all of that on an electronic form where things got routed through the company electronically and documents got scanned in or PDFs got uploaded and the folders went away. And at any time somebody could go in and see the status of one of our orders, where it was, if it was in engineering, if it had gone to manufacturing. And that was all through our continuous improvement teams, and it allowed us to do bigger volume of custom projects. It was very impactful. And all of that came from the partner.
Experience, connections, capital, continuous improvement.
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes me think of the benefits of just maybe not so much private equity, because there's not a lot of businesses that are capable of getting acquired by private equity, but I think we underestimate the value of a partnership.
Yeah, and experience and mentorship. Again, I do a lot of speaking to small business owners, and medium and some large size business owners through the Vistage network, and I talk to them about the impact of like making a 0.5 point improvement in your gross margins and a 0.5 point improvement in your net margins every year. Like, what does it take to do that? Just a 0.5 point. Like, how do you really look at that? Is it through continuous improvement, pricing, optimization, sourcing? Like, what can you do to make little tiny improvements every single year? Because little tiny improvements over time turn into big improvements over a long tail. And that's what private equity groups typically do, is they're going to make little tiny cuts everywhere in the business, where it's a change to pricing, a change to sourcing, a change in HR function. We're going to outsource our HR. We're going to insource our HR. We're going to, how are we going to do that? And then do that in a way that takes you from a 15% EBITDA business to a 19% EBITDA business over 4 or 5 years. What does that do to the valuation of the business? It's huge. And it's those little things. And I tell them, you could do all of this now. You don't need a private equity partner for it. You just need someone to tell you, like, hey, it's great that your business is making money, but your business is an asset, it's an investment, it's something that you own. You should be increasing the value of it every single year, and do the things a private equity partner would do to increase the value now. Don't wait until you sell and let them get all the squeeze for that.
So your first was, I think you said you were at $7 million in sales? What did you don't have to give me the number, but what was the multiple after that, after you got with your first private equity? And then we're running out of time, so how much did you multiply after the next private equity buyout? Because you did two.
Sure. Yeah, so my partnership with my first group, I owned 27% of the business. And then over that 4-year and 3-month period, we grew the company. We never did a single add-on acquisition. We had a whole pipeline of acquisitions.
Wow. When did they realize that wasn't the play, when you guys were just doing so well?
It was probably about 2 years in. We had a company under LOI, and there was some hair on the deal. There was some incontinuity between our two management teams.
That's what it was.
Yeah, and really the CEO of the other company, who wasn't really a shareholder, just put her foot down and said, I don't even want to be associated with your company. You're a low margin commodity business and we make beautiful products. And we all sat back and we're like, do we really want to get involved in this? And the management at my private equity group, their comment at that point in time was, we would do this deal if you weren't so successful right now, but you're just knocking the cover off the ball. And during our ownership period, we tripled revenue and almost quadrupled EBITDA. So
that's impressive.
And we did it at a time where the technology convergence of fluorescent to LED was just taking off, and for small companies that were in the channels that we were in, we really did it as well or better than anybody in our industry, and that was recognized when we went into our process in 2017.
So real quick, the last one comes around. They had a conversation with you 2 years before, said, hey, here's what's going to happen. You need to make a decision right now if you're going to stay on or if you're not going to stay on. And I guess you decided you were going to stay on because you stayed on again, didn't you?
I did. It was there were a couple points on that. One was I was having fun.
Right.
I mean, winning is fun. Our board meetings were fun. Every time we did a board meeting, it was a celebration of our success and planning for how we were going to create more success in the future. Our internal board process was really good. Again, we didn't have board meetings before my private equity sponsor. I tell private companies all the time, build a board, like have somebody hold you accountable. The first thing you do in a board meeting is go through what your action items were from the meeting before and make sure that your executive team did something on the action items. Like we built a board process, and what we looked at was gross margin, EBITDA margin, percentage of LED sales, and top line growth. I mean, those were the things that we were leaning into as core things for our business. And everybody on our executive team knew what was important to the business, and we leaned into that. And we had a great board process. We had great internal structure, and I loved what we were doing. I wasn't going to leave.
But wouldn't you have been concerned? But these guys were out, no? Or was this the board would stay? But this group was out. There's going to be a new group that come in that could ultimately affect the culture.
It could happen, but at that moment in time, it was, do I stay or do I go? And I was like, this is my team, this is my company, this is my brand. We're winning. I like winning. I'm not leaving. And I think the company, and there's no way to know, but I thought to my core, if I was sitting at the table at the time we went to sell, the company would be more valuable. And to this day, you'd be hard to convince me otherwise.
And were you involved in the process of who and what firm was going to buy the company?
100%. Yeah, 100%. We went through the traditional investment banker-led process. We had the management meetings where me and my entire team sat at the management meetings going through the presentation of the company with the top 10 buyers. We had a lot of interest in the company because we were in such a hot space and our growth was astronomical. And we really leaned into all the factors that it would take to increase valuation. And really, when it came down to the end, we selected a partner that looked operationally exactly like our old partner, and they checked all those boxes. Great operators, tremendous history, middle America firm. I mean, they were just the perfect fit for us, and they were the right fit, and it was a great exit and a great partnership.
So explain this. I have a pretty good idea, but I want you to explain it. So let's start with the first time you literally you gave up all the hair off your back. You risked a lot, right? So there wasn't really much coming to you except the actual equity of the company. You did what you did. Now, the first acquisition comes. How does that work, Jason? And then I want to compare it to the second one and then the last one, which eventually you are out. How do you get paid? Like, you stay on, you keep a salary, maybe you get a bonus or whatever, but they ultimately buy the company, and you, I guess with each buyout, you get a nice fat check in the mail, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's, without getting into...
Yeah, I don't want to get into detail. This is just for people, and most of my questions are for the audience who just maybe they don't have an understanding. And I'm thinking of a couple people, like literally in my head, who are very interested in this, and this is like they would want to know, because from my understanding is you take the full check and then you have to reinvest it back into the company, correct?
Yeah, that's at a very high level. I mean, when you get down to the details, it gets a little more complicated. But for simplicity,
yeah,
the company has a value, and if your company's worth $1, and you are making a 15-cent reinvestment, then 15 cents stays in the company. You get your 85 cents out, and with that 85 cents, you have to pay off any debt the company has.
Right.
So cash-free, debt-free. So that 85 cents comes from you. That 15 cents that goes into the company, that 15 cents is built into a ratio with how much equity they contribute to take the debt out. And the ratio of your equity to their equity is pretty much what you own as a percentage of the company. And then as time goes on, when you go to do your second exit, there's the debt that's of the company. If the debt's extinguished, it's zero. If the debt's still there, then the first section of the proceeds that come out pay off the debt. And then everybody gets their pro rata share. And if your pro rata share is $1 for the second turn, and you're making a 5% reinvestment, then you put 5 into the new cap table, and the new cap table gets built.
Perfect. So you have now the second bite of the apple. How long, what was that? How long was it before you finally got out? Like, how long was that? What was the terms on that? 5 years, 10 years?
There's never a long trail on the terms. Usually they want you to sign up for 2 years, and they kind of enforce that through an employment contract or something along those lines. For us, we had, while we were in due diligence, our second private equity partner was talking to a company of very similar size that had a strong management team and an excellent brand, and really it was a perfect match for the two companies. But because we were coming into it of similar size and similar scale, the decision was made to bring a CEO from the outside to kind of manage everything. So at that point, it went from me being the CEO of my company to me really being the president of my brand. And then there was another brand that had their leadership, and then we had our shared resources with the CEO over the top. And then I went through that period, and at about 2.5, 3 years, I was just at a time to go do something else. COVID was just starting, and it was just the right time for me to step away, and I did.
Well, Jason, congratulations, man. Congratulations at winning on life and business. Because business, it's tough, Jason. Your experience is it's a rarity, man. It doesn't happen. I mean, I'm sure it happens a lot more often than people think, but it's something that's you should be very, very, very proud of what you were able to build on the front end to be able to do that and get along with the characters and the different people that you ultimately had to get along with in order to be successful. It's very difficult. People can't let their ego, they let their ego get in the way of partnering up with things like that, with groups like that.
Well, thank you for that. I did have some great mentors. My partners at Finkston were great mentors and kind of built me into what it meant to be in a private equity sponsored company. And really kind of as I was getting into, the end of 19, approaching 20, my mindset was I want to write all this down and pay it forward. And it was really important to me to create like something that could go to the next generation of business owners that could kind of teach them, hey, this is how leverage buyout works. Like, hey, this is what a private equity partner should look like. Like, hey, this is what due diligence really is. They're not just checking your numbers. And I kind of started down the path of writing the book, and as I was going through that, I had kind of a colleague, a friend, an acquaintance who was being approached by private equity and said, hey, can you help me walk through this process? I understand you know a lot about it. And then I went from being the mentee to the mentor, and that's how I started my advisement practice, because now I had a top tier client, and it was a top tier company. Very, very high valuation, much bigger than my company ever was. And I ended up kind of being his Sherpa through his exit process and finding an investment bank and a private equity sponsor and all that. And at that point, I kind of professionalized my exit practice to kind of be the one to hold people's hands. And again, it kind of happened faster than I expected. I had a friend who needed help. It was a big company, and in order to step in and really do him well on his exit, I need to professionalize my company, and I did.
Jason, you are the owner of Hendren Business Advisors in Orlando, Florida, and you do just that. You are a certified exit planning advisor, and you are helping business owners and companies ultimately scale to sale through value acceleration and everything that we know about it. And I will tell you the difference between you and a lot of other SEPAs is, man, you've fucking been through it.
Yeah, I actually technically don't have the SEPA designation anymore.
Oh, I thought you did.
No, I did.
You don't need it, Jason. If anybody doesn't need it, it's you.
I didn't keep up with the continuing education, so I want to be clear about that. But yes,
that's fine. Your resume speaks for itself.
But I'll tell you, I get a lot of pleasure of getting to the closing table with my clients and them sitting there going, the best compliment they give me is, you told me everything that was going to happen before it happened, and I was prepared for it when it did.
So, last question.
Yes, sir.
What do you wish you knew before you sold to private equity? Like the one thing that it's just like, man, that one, I really wish I would have known that part of it.
I wish I knew how leverage would have affected my outcome on my second deal.
Oh.
Just a little bit of leverage would have been 50% more proceeds.
Oh.
I wish I knew how that worked. If I knew then what I know now, I would have been like, listen, put 1.5 turns of our EBITDA on your line of credit. We're putting some leverage on this deal. I wish. Oh gosh. It would have been absolutely positively meaningful on my exit from Finkston Partners to our second group. It would have been absolutely meaningful had they put just a little bit of leverage on the front end and I didn't know to ask the question.
Interesting. Well, now you know, people. Now you know. Jason, I mean, guys, get his book. I'm telling you. I mean, it was a game changer for me. I really thank you for writing that book, Things I Wish I Knew Before I Sold to Private Equity. You can get it on Amazon, and I read it on Kindle like I read most of my books. And thank you for writing that book. And again, honestly, congratulations to all of your success. I wish you nothing but more and more and more success. Obviously, you figured out life after exit, so good for you. That's good. And yeah, hopefully one day we could actually meet in person.
We'll meet you in Lakeland.
That sounds good. Deal.
Deal. Thank you for having me, Vince. I really appreciate it.
All right, Jason. Thanks.